Wow. What an audience. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks to everyone who's already bought the book in advance. I really appreciate it. That's what I want to talk about today, folks, because it's been about a year and a half now of my life. I've written 4 books, but this one by far was the most tedious to put together. I had to have 2 co-authors actually help me out. And the reason I wrote the book, this whole spying scandal, this debacle, this atrocious disgrace of a scandal that happened to our president. You know, a lot of cops, federal agents in the room, anyone have experience in law enforcement? Yeah, a couple, raise your hand. If I'm wrong, call me out on this, but when I was a cop and then a Secret Service agent, if you have even an ounce of empathy for human beings, which most of you in this room have more than an ounce, you have a whole lot, you'll arrest a lot of bad people for a lot of really bad things. But one of the things that impacted me so deeply in my life, I'm not going to say the guy's name for obvious reasons, but let's call him John Doe. You know, we hit a door at about 6 o'clock in the morning to arrest this guy in a credit card fraud scheme, and it was ugly. I mean, it had been hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you're a federal agent, you don't get to arrest people for like $5 petty crimes or anything like that. They'll throw you right out of there. It was a serious crime. We arrested the guy, and I remember after working on this case for 6 months, there was this sense of accomplishment tempered immediately by this awful feeling in my gut. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, you arrest them, and you don't anticipate the human side of it. Well, what happened? The guy's young kids ran out. That's their dad. He actually wasn't the worst guy in the world. He was actually a good father to his kids, and they're watching their father in handcuffs. And the wife is crying. Their life is over. Now, the guy was a bad guy, don't get me wrong. But again, we're all human beings, and I've got to tell you almost scarred me for the rest of my time. I kept thinking to myself, I couldn't get that image out of my head. What bothers me about that and how that ties to this Spygate thing and why this whole thing has consumed the last year and a half of my life is that guy was an actual bad guy. Imagine if you find out you're the President of the United States, all you did was win an election, and you find out the massive machinery of the federal government with the ability to slap bracelets on you in the form of handcuffs, take your life and your freedom, was turned against you. Folks, this happened. This is the biggest scandal of our generation. There's no close second. This makes Watergate look like romper room. Now, I only have about 20 minutes or so to get through this. This is usually about a 45-minute speech. I just gave it in California. But I promise you, there wasn't one person falling asleep the entire time. I'm going to walk you through what happened. It's all in the book, by the way, in great detail. And what we did in the book, if you choose to buy it or not, it's totally up to you. I'm happy to sign them. I won't leave until I sign every one of them. But read the footnotes. We deliberately did not use footnotes from right-leaning resources. I used CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times, because anyone who tells you, oh, this didn't happen, just go to the footnotes and say, did you read this article? It happened, folks. The President of the United States had the intelligence community and the law enforcement community of the United States at the highest levels weaponized against him. Now, I like to break it down simply into how they did this. They had plan A, plan B, and plan C. And the joke of the whole thing, and when I say joke, I don't mean funny, I mean a tragic joke, is it wasn't known as plan A, plan B, and plan C. You know why? They thought plan A was just fine, so it was just the plan. When plan A failed, they had to move on to plan B and then plan C, which is the cleanup operation. Here's how this whole thing starts against Donald Trump. During the election, the Obama administration, which had done whatever it wants because the media is lost in this country, folks. There's no media. Forget it. That's dead and buried. The media's done. They don't do journalism anymore. It's activism, nothing more, right? The Obama administration had grown comfortable with the idea of weaponizing government against their political enemies. It had happened over and over again. We had the IRS scandal. We had the AP phone records scandal, the Jim Rosen Fox News scandal. And I ask you this, what happened to any of the people involved? Anyone? Yeah, the answer is nothing. I have to do zeros like this now. because I used to do zeros like this, but I found out through the liberal media that somehow this means like a white power symbol now or something. I thought it meant okay or zero, but the media says, no, I'm serious, like these idiots in the media will tell you. So now I do zeros like that because I'm like afraid of some media idiot. These people are crazy. The Obama administration had gotten completely comfortable with the idea of abusing government for their political means. So what happens? This plan gets hatched, and I'm going to be candid with you. Where exactly it's hatched, nobody is yet sure of to this day. Matter of fact, if you're familiar with my commentary on Fox, I say often one of the great mysteries of this case is what's paragraph 1? Paragraph 1, what do I mean by that? When I was a federal agent, when you arrest someone, you have to do what's called an MR, a memorandum report. Paragraph 1 of that MR is always how the case started. I got a call from Jane Doe, bank fraud investigator, said this credit card number was stolen on April 14, 2015. I made a few calls, and the next thing you know, it's an 80-page report about this massive scheme. Paragraph 1, though, always lays it out. Always. Do you know to this day we still have no idea what paragraph 1, the why they started to spy on the Trump team was? Now, I get it. It was for political. I get that. But at some point, somebody, you have to understand, folks, had to put down on paper a semi-legitimate reason to start the most massive spying operation in a political campaign in U.S. history. Do you know nobody to this day will tell you what that is? I know what it is. So the first plan they do to hit the Trump team, folks, is they learn to manipulate these about queries in the NSA database. The NSA has a database of a whole boatload of information, metadata, texts, that kind of stuff. How it works is too complicated in the time I have, but what you can do is you can query that NSA system and you can get a whole lot of information. Well, what happens? This is plan A. This is how they're going to get the information. I hope, if I'm not following, please stop me, because this is important. The Obama administration figures out that through unmasking, in other words, wiretapping people, pretending they're targeting foreigners, and then querying information in this database, that they can get all the political opposition research in the world that they need against the Trump team. It's beautiful. No one's going to call them out. The media is on their side, right? But there's a good guy in this. There's a white hat. Somebody in the government sniffs this thing out. That's why I tell you, this wasn't plan A. This was the plan. They were going to unmask people, wiretap people, and they were going to query this NSA database and get all the information they needed about the Trump team. But somebody smells a problem, and he's not having it. And he's the white hat. He's the good guy in this story. And it's Mike Rogers of the NSA. Mike Rogers of the NSA senses that there's something wrong about these about queries. In other words, who's tapping into the database here and making political queries? Now, folks, some of you, I don't know your politics. I assume most of you are conservative, libertarian, or Republican, but that's fine either way. If you doubt any of what I'm telling you, just Google the FISA Intelligence Surveillance Court, their report on about queries. Because Mike Rogers goes to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and says, Houston, we got a problem. These queries are supposed to follow very specific guidelines about terrorism, and all these metrics have to be, you can't just spy on Americans in the database. The FISA court looks into it, comes back with a report that was released in March of 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, that is devastating. If you haven't read it, you were doing yourself a great disservice. Page 80 specifically is horrifying. Apparently, the NSA database was being queried by private contractors working with the FBI. These were not even government officials. People within the government were using private contractors to query information they had no judicial or legal authority whatsoever to look at. Rogers smells a rat. People panic in the government. Now, conveniently, what happens right after the election? I'm going to put these pieces together and things will start to make sense. Donald Trump's elected. He's the president-elect, right? 10 days after the election, Rogers, who knows this has been going on the whole time, these unmaskings, the tapping of the... Now does the Donald Trump tweet, they tap Trump Tower, or then how does it make sense? He got the wording wrong. He didn't understand exactly how it worked, but the idea was not wrong. Donald Trump's not stupid, trust me. Guy got elected president, earned $1 billion. I love, by the way, I love how these journalists criticize him. The guy's making $25,000 a year writing clickbait pieces for BuzzFeed. Like, Donald Trump's an idiot. Hard pass, brother. Like, well, the guy just won he runs for office the first time and he becomes the president. But let me listen to Joey Bag of Donuts at BuzzFeed. You're right, you've got this. It's like, so about 10 days after the election, Donald Trump, someone goes up to visit Donald Trump in Trump Tower. Who visits him? Mike Rogers. But Rogers doesn't tell anyone. This is going to trip you out totally. He doesn't tell anybody in the White House he's going up there. He visits Trump in Trump Tower, conveniently 10 days after the election, which from my experience in the Secret Service is just enough time for them to go up to Trump Tower, WACA, the White House Communications Agency, for the president-elect, and set up a SCIF where they can talk privately, a sensitive, compartmentalized information facility. In other words, a place where no one can listen in. Rogers gives it about 10 days, goes up there, has this big meeting with Donald Trump, and what happens the very next day? Donald Trump evacuates Trump Tower and goes to Bedminster, New Jersey to never return for another meeting. You think that was a coinky-dink? Like he did that by accident? Oh, let's just go up to Bedminster. I got nothing else to do. Now, again, this is all in the book in intricate detail. The greatest spy story ever told, except the fact that it actually happened, and it happened against you. Rogers has this meeting. Trump evacuates Trump Tower. The very next day, the Obama administration comes out and calls for somebody to be fired. Who's that somebody? Mike Rogers. And they start blaming it on things like drone strikes and other stuff. Like, really? Could you be any more obvious? The Obama administration knows Rogers is the good guy and fills Trump in on this entire debacle. He probably goes up there and says, brother, they're spying on you, like right now. He doesn't know, but now he does. So he leaves. All of a sudden, people start resigning from the federal government after that. You know who also resigns? Bob Hannigan. Now, who's Bob Hannigan? Bob Hannigan is the head of the GCHQ, which is the British NSA. Well, why do you think the head of the British NSA would resign right after that Rogers meeting, right after Trump finds out about this massive spying operation? I'm going to tell you why right now. I'm not taking a selfie of you. I'm not taking a selfie of myself. I'm going to read to you a headline. This is from CNN. See it right there. I didn't Photoshop this. April 14th, 2017. Remember who Bob Hannigan is. He's the head of the British NSA. British intelligence passed Trump associates' communications with Russians on to U.S. counterparts. You think I'm making this up? That's CNN. I didn't write it. They wrote that. So not only is the United States government in Plan A weaponizing its intelligence community to listen in and computer search the Trump team to hurt them during the campaign for political oppo, they're working with the British and the Australians to pass information about the Trump team onto the Obama administration. Don't take it from me. Take it from CNN. They find out about this. Now, this thing breaks down about halfway through. They move on to Plan B. Sorry, there's a lot more to Plan A, but in the interest of time, I want to get through this because the cleanup operation is important. They move on to Plan B. What's Plan B? They realize Rogers is onto them. They're like, hey, folks, we better ease up on the unmasking and the tapping into the database. People are getting caught. This is probably not good. We're leaving a massive paper trail. And what if we lose, right? They move on to Plan B. Plan B is Crossfire Hurricane. They say, well, listen, if we can't spy on them illegally, let's just spy on them legally. We have this beautiful thing called the FISA court, where we can walk into the FISA court, we can get a warrant on somebody, and when you get a warrant on somebody in the Trump team, they have this beautiful thing for the Obama administration called the two-hop rule. Well, it's for everyone, not just for Obama. Meaning, if I spy on you, and you're a member of the Trump team, I can hop to everybody you emailed, and then everybody they emailed. So basically, all I need to do is get a FISA warrant on the guy cleaning the floors in Trump Tower, and I've got everyone. Because if he emailed his boss and his boss emailed Don Jr., I get everybody. Beautiful, right? Not really. Because they were stupid. They were dumb. And they screwed up. The problem with the FISA court, unlike the unmaskings and the tapping into the database, is they had to produce actual evidence in front of a judge. There was a judge in a FISA court that needed evidence that the Trump team was working on behalf of a foreign power, but critically doing it in violation of at least one U.S. law. Folks, they had nothing. They had zero. Do you understand they, to this day, have absolutely zero? Zero. Remember, don't do it one hand. It's a big mistake. Media people, you'll be a white power person after that. You always do it that way. They had zero evidence at all. The funny thing, I'm only half kidding. That's how worried I am about the media. They're so crazy these days, right? They had nothing on collusion. Nothing. Zero. So what does the FBI and the State Department and the DOJ do? They say, well, we don't really have any evidence. Let's just make it up. We've got this guy we worked with in the past, this guy Christopher Steele. Now I'm going to do this. I'm not taking a selfie again. I'm not taking a picture of you. Don't you worry. I'm going to read to you another headline. You need to write this down because this one's going to blow your mind. Any of you read the dossier? You haven't, right? Not many people have. You should. If you haven't read the dossier, don't you worry. Because the dossier was already written back on April 17th of 2007. You're like, what do you mean? I don't get it. It's 2017, right? No, I didn't get that wrong. It's written right here in the Wall Street Journal on April 17th, 2007. Who's the author of this critical Wall Street Journal piece? Glenn Simpson and Mary Jacoby, his wife. Glenn Simpson, the purveyor of Fusion GPS. The article is called, How Lobbyists Help Ex-Soviets Woo Washington. Folks, I dare you to take a moment and read that piece. Put it next to the dossier. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same story. It was written 11 years ago. Glenn Simpson clearly had this information about Russian influence in Washington. He wrote 10 years ago. Read the names in the article. You know who appears in this article? Paul Manafort, all of these players. So what likely happened after Plan A collapses is they say, listen, let's go to the FISA court and do this legally, but we need evidence. We don't have evidence. Don't worry. Hillary Clinton's got a guy at Fusion GPS, says he's got a story to tell. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Simpson took his Wall Street Journal piece like it was a movie script, scratched out the names, put Donald Trump's name in there and said, look, do I got a story for you guys? It's all BS. The whole dossier is crap. Read the article. It's a movie script they recycled. It's a fairy tale. It's an Aesop's fable. It's made up. It's a scam. There is not a scintilla of evidence that it's true. Now, the big question on Plan B till I move to the mop-up operation, Plan C. Now they're in trouble. They're in a lot of trouble because they realize the dossier in and of itself is crap. And a lot of people at the Bureau know it. They need to buttress it with some stuff to make it a little harder. Now's where the Michael Cohen story comes in, Trump's lawyer. In the dossier is a very specific allegation, right? That Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, went over to Prague to set up this whole information exchange with the Russians, right? Well, what's the problem? Michael Cohen had never been to Prague, and his passport proved it. Where do you think they got that name, Michael Cohen? You're darn right. They probably were in that NSA database looking up a Michael Cohen, and they got the wrong guy. I know there's only one Dan Bongino. I can tell you for sure there are a whole lot of Michael Cohens. Are you right? John Smith, John Brown, Cohen, these are common last names. They got the wrong Michael Cohen. So now you should be asking yourself, who the heck was Glenn Simpson dealing with in the government that gave him that name? And how did they get it? Plan B falls apart too. Plan B falls apart because something happens in November. Donald Trump wins. Nobody, I'm telling you, take it to the bank, cash this check, and spend the money. Nobody saw that coming. No one. Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to get in. This was all going to go away. They were going to appoint their own attorney general, probably John Brennan, and this story is never, ever to see the light of day, not in their lifetimes. But make no mistake, they know what they did. They all know what they did. Every single one of them. So they have to move on to Plan C. Plan C, I call it clean up on aisle 4. Now they're in trouble. They know they've got white hats in the government. I know one of them right now that's still in the FBI. That's unquestionably cooperating with this investigation, if you know how to read the tea leaves. And if you read the book, you'll figure out who it is. People start cooperating and talking, and now people are panicking. Now does John Brennan's meltdown after the election make sense? He's the head of the intelligence community who, again, another thing for you to Google, but it's all in the book again. Who do you think John Brennan met with right before the election at the, quote, director level as reported on by multiple media outlets? Bob Hannigan, the same guy from the British intelligence agency that quits right after Trump's election. He quits 10 days after and doesn't tell anybody about it. He says, oh, I'm leaving for family reasons. What do you mean? You related to Donald Trump? What do you mean family reasons? Family reasons, you're leaving because Donald Trump got elected. Who also quits? John Carlin. Who's John Carlin? He's the head of the Department of Justice National Security Division, the final division in the Department of Justice to put their John Hancock on the FISA warrant. He quits right after the election. Who did John Carlin work for? Now clean up on aisle 4 is going to start to make sense. Who did John Carlin work for before he got there into the DOJ? He's Bob Mueller's chief of staff. He was Bob Mueller's chief. Now does Bob Mueller make sense? Clean up aisle 4, get the mops out. Everybody realizes they're all going down. They faked a FISA warrant. They have been involved in massive unmaskings. Susan Rice, Samantha Power. They have been busted by the FISA court, tapping into the NSA database for about queries. They left a paper trail 65 miles long. Bob Mueller has to clean this whole mess up. Bob Mueller is the only... Did you notice how right away they had the name? So Bob Mueller's old chief of staff, he's the cleanup guy. Listen, make no mistake. Bob Mueller's job right now is one thing and one thing only. Keep the heat on Donald Trump relentlessly for anything. Jaywalking, ripping off mattress tags, combing his hair the wrong way. Keep the attention on Trump no matter what. Because the minute the Bob Mueller thing is dissolved, all of this is going to come out, and it is hell hath no fury. Folks, they left a paper trail. They can't run from this. Mueller is brought in to get Trump impeached because they don't want any of this to see the light of day. Now, why Mueller? Mueller knows every player involved in this and has intimate connections with all of them. The guy who signs off on the BS FISA warrant, John Carlin, his old chief of staff. His chief bulldog in the case, Andy Weissman. Andrew Weissman worked with Bob Mueller. Andy Weissman was the chief prosecutor on the Enron case when Bob Mueller was the FBI director. Remember the Enron case that they screwed up royally? That's how they know each other. Andy Weissman hates Donald Trump. He's on emails congratulating Sally Yates for telling Donald Trump to go pound sand. Well, it gets better. Who else does Bob Mueller know? On Bob Mueller's Enron team, it all goes back to Enron. That same Enron team, headed by Andy Weissman, had another lead lawyer on the case. Who was it? Catherine Rumler. Who's Catherine Rumler? Obama's White House counsel, who was Obama's lawyer while all of this was going on. They know each other. Now, you may say, fine, so Bob Mueller knows Obama's lawyer while this whole Spygate thing was going on. What's the big deal? You Google George Nader, Daily Beast, you can read an article today. Just popped today before we showed up. One of Bob Mueller's lead cooperators in this case, who's been selling out members of the Trump team from day one, is a guy named George Nader. Who's George Nader's lawyer? Catherine Rumler, Obama's White House counsel and Bob Mueller's buddy. The lawyer for the lead witness in this case feeding information to Mueller is Obama's White House counsel, otherwise known as the fixer. She fixed everything for them. She was involved in Benghazi. She was involved in the IRS. She was involved in the Secret Service scandal. Just Google her name, put in any one of those things, and who's the person giving the statement? Catherine Rumler. Who was also on that Enron task force? Lisa Monaco, Barack Obama's Homeland Security and Counterterrorism advisor in the White House while all of this was going on. They all know each other. Finally, and I'll take some questions. Your final piece to the cleanup on aisle 4 operation. Who else does Bob Mueller know? Who now has legislative, who has control over this, I should say, right now in the Department of Justice, right? Rod Rosenstein, right? Because Sessions had recused himself, now Whitaker's in there, which was a good appointment, right? A case happens a little while ago, the 10X case. It's around 2015 or so. It happens in Maryland. I'm familiar with it because I worked in Maryland as a Secret Service agent in Baltimore. I wasn't involved in that case at all, but I know the office well. The 10X case goes down in Maryland. The 10X case, a cooperator for the United States government paid $50,000 by the FBI, comes to the FBI with some troubling information that the Russians are helping the Iranians build their nuclear program and that there's a company helping Russians get a hold of our uranium. It's called the 10X case. It was the precursor to something you may have heard about, the Uranium One operation. The same players are involved. The case gets thrown out on a BS press release on a Friday night so nobody will pay attention. Everybody's gag ordered, and it all goes away. That the Obama administration, an FBI paid informant, admitted that we were giving the Russians uranium while they were building the Iranian nuclear program and chanting death to America. Who was the lead prosecutor on that 10X case, the precursor to Uranium One? Rod Rosenstein. And who's the FBI director? Bob Mueller. Folks, they all know each other. This is the biggest scam in American history. Folks, I beg of you, I really do. You cannot let your legislative people, your congressmen or anyone off the hook. Whatever connections you have, you need to keep the heat on this, because if these people don't go down the right way, unlike the Obama administration tried to do it to us, this will happen again. I'm telling you, what they did was such a grotesque, horrendous abuse of power. It disgusts me to this day, and I will never, ever forget that story about that guy we arrested and his crying kid that morning who wasn't going to see his dad for another year. That's a horrible thing to have to do to someone, and it's a grotesque thing to do to someone, to unleash the power of the federal government when they did nothing wrong. And Donald Trump did nothing wrong. And if you read the book, and by the way, one last thing before I get to the questions. It's not a narrative. You don't have to read it straight through. It's written like a police file. I think that's why it's been selling like crazy. You can read the last chapter first. You can go right, it's written like a police file, because the names, like I said, this is an hour-long speech I compressed into 20-plus minutes. The names never stop coming up again, ever. Oleg Deripaska, connected to Vladimir Putin, who's connected to Adam Waldman, a lobbyist who's emailing and texting Mark Warner, a Democrat on the Senate committee. Who's Waldman working for too? Christopher Steele, the guy working for Hillary. They're connected to the Russians. The people that show up at the Trump Tower meeting, Veselnitskaya with Don Jr. and Rinat Akhmetshin. Veselnitskaya works for Fusion GPS on a separate case. And Akhmetshin, the other guy, the Russian intel guy that shows up at the Trump Tower meeting, you know who his lawyer is? Edward Lieberman. You know who Lieberman's wife is? Evelyn Lieberman, Bill Clinton's old chief of staff. Read the book, folks. It's all laid out for you. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'll take your questions. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Sure.
They love you. That was very well done. We have time just for a couple of quick questions, but before we get to Dr. Gorka and whoever else Mike Finch calls on, Dan has an amazing podcast. I meant to mention it in the introduction. You can go to Apple iTunes and Google for the Dan Bongino Show. And recently he had George Papadopoulos on, and he did what every good interviewer should do, not interrupt and let him talk. It's very highly recommended.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, please, I would really appreciate that. It's free. It's called the Dan Bongino Show. We're like the third biggest show in the country now. But if you want it down, it's all free. It doesn't, it's on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud. It's at Bongino.com. You just click the play button. You don't have to do anything. But check it out. And please check out that interview with Papadopoulos. It is eye-opening. He's the key figure in this whole thing. So, oh, Mr. Gorka, question. We know this.
Dan, after the panel this morning with Joe DeGenoa and Victoria Tunzing and this presentation, we have incontrovertible proof of the biggest political law enforcement intelligence scandal since our republic was founded.
Yeah.
Is it enough for the right person to become AG? If it isn't, what more do we need for justice to be done?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get this question a lot. As a matter of fact, that speech you and I were chatting about in California, same group I spoke in wants Sebastian. They want the A-team, I guess, right? I'm just kidding, my head's not that big. But they wanted Sebastian to come speak, and I was out there, and I get this question all the time. They say, well, what's going to happen? And I'm here to give you the bad news, unfortunately. No, I mean it. I'll give you the bad news and the good news. The bad news is nothing. I am not convinced anything's going to happen to any of these people at all. Remember, justice isn't blind in the United States. It's only blind to Democrats. I mean, look, Bob Menendez got off. Hillary Clinton got nothing. I mean, it's completely obvious that Hillary Clinton was involved in federal crimes. There's no doubt about it. It's just there's no will to prosecute Democrats. And the reason for that, as Sebastian knows as well as a lot of you do, is the media are full of liberals that will protect the Democrats to the end. You know, they'll have Donald Trump potentially thrown out of office for ripping a mattress tag off. Hillary Clinton will, you know, trade information over a private server that the Russians and Chinese were most likely reading, and nothing happens at all. Now, you say, well, what's the good news in that? I'm just being candid with you. I'm not convinced anything's going to happen at all. There's a massive paper trail on this. I think you'll get some of the non-politically connected players. I think Andy McCabe's in a lot of trouble. I actually think Jim Comey's in more trouble than you think. That's, again, if I had more time, I'd explain to you why, but he's in a world of trouble. He hid the case from Congress for 8 months. He's obligated to report quarterly. I know liberals have a tough time with math, but that means every 3 months. So Comey's in a world of trouble. But the politically connected players, Brennan, Clapper, John Carlin, Susan Rice, Samantha Power, the people who were involved, I'm not convinced anything's going to happen at all. Here's the good news. You know, I always say I hate quotes because I think it's like for lazy men when speak when they oh, let me quote someone else. Talk yourself. You can't figure it out. But some are really good. And, you know, the book The Natural is just tremendous by Bernard Malibu. And in the book, he says, you know, we all live 2 lives, the one we learn from and the one we live after that. And the only path to true happiness is through suffering. So I always bring that up in the end because, folks, it stinks. It physically and mentally wears on you knowing that we're always going to be the subject of ridiculous scrutiny by hacks in the media and police state tyrants in our government that hate us, while the other side gets a pass and gets celebrated on college campuses and they leave like heroes like Hillary Clinton. But that's your suffering. I mean, I'm not Tony Robbins. I'm not here for an inspirational speech. I'm just here to tell you that whatever your religion is, Jewish, Christian, whatever it is, the lesson from Jesus Christ and just about everyone in the Old Testament is the only path to salvation is suffering. You're here fighting for a cause. You know in the end is probably not going to work out for you. But one day, you're going to be standing next to Hillary Clinton at the pearly gates of heaven or wherever you may go. And you're going to be able to say, damn it, I did the right thing and stood for what was right, while this joker scammed her entire time. Know your life meant something, and theirs are meaningless. And know one more thing. Although we may not get actual justice out of this, you will get cosmic justice. And cosmic justice is this. History eventually tells the real tale. Every single time. David Dinkins was a hero in New York until Rudy Giuliani won twice and they realized how awful his administration was. And sooner or later, they had to tell the truth. When the truth comes out, Hillary Clinton's legacy will be nothing more than a stain on this country. And forever in textbooks, kids are going to read her as a cautionary tale of what never to do when you get power, and that will never happen to any of you. So take that to the bank and celebrate that one. That's the justice you're going to get. Yes, ma'am.
We're going to have one last question, and then we're going to stay in the room for Ken Starr, and Dan's going to sign books outside.
Thank you. What about the FISA court judge that all of this fake information went to? Is he allowed to make any comment?
Now, there were multiple FISA court judges. Remember, there were 4 FISAs. There was an original FISA and 3 renewals. I get this question a lot. Was the FISA court judge in on it, right? Now, I can't tell you that this categorically, but my research, and if you read the book, you'll probably come to the conclusion, no. They were just lied to. Remember, there was no hearing. No hearing. You understand what I'm telling you? They walked into court and said, do you swear to this document? And they said yes, and there was no hearing. So basically, the judge is assuming that the person putting their right hand up, swearing the dossier information in there was true. It wasn't the judge's fault. So do I believe they were in on it? No. But that's where the paper trail ends. And that's why I told you, I think a lot of the unpolitically connected people are in a world of trouble. I think Peter Strzok is in trouble. I think Lisa Page is in trouble. I think Bill Priestep is already working with the federal government to take these people down. I think the law enforcement people are in trouble. But I think the politically connected people are going to get a complete pass on this. I don't think a darn thing is going to happen to Hillary Clinton. But remember, she's going to have to answer to the cosmic justice that, and in the end, to me, I know we're doing the right thing, folks. And, we fight the good fight. They fight the easy fight. So. Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I'll tell you, how to change the media? Go, if you donate to any colleges or endowments, paperclip $1 to your next donation. Say you're not getting, this is my last dollar until you get some conservatives in your school of journalism. That's how you do it. All right, I'll be outside. I'll see you all if you want to find a book. So thanks for your time.
Wow. You said you'd have a couple people. My wife and I never get out of the house, ever. How many people listen to my podcast in here, by the way? Oh, wow, a lot. So here's my speech. Here's what I want to talk about. You ever see the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Let's do it in reverse, right? Because I want to leave you with the good news. I want to talk about the ugly, the bad, and the good, right? I never want to leave you with the bad news because I'm a really optimistic, cheery guy in contrast to my cinder block head and generally dour look on Fox. People always say, smile more. I'm like, why? I'm a happy guy. I don't need to smile more, right? No. Sorry, I'm a little punchy. It's like I said, it's past my bedtime. So the ugly portion first of what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the fight of our lives right now politically. I don't want anyone in this room to make any mistakes otherwise. I'm only 43 years old. I've been intimately involved in politics for only about 10 years. Many of you have been involved for decades more than I have. So I'm not speaking to a virgin crowd here. You understand what I'm talking about. The party of John F. Kennedy, that moderate Democrat wing that talked about reasonable tax cuts, economic growth, we love America, plant the flag, we'll get to the moon first. That thing is dead, bury it, put that coffin 6 feet in the ground. That party is over. If you think for a second that that's what we're dealing with right now, I am sorry, but you are in the wrong fight. Now, I don't disparage all Democrats because that's what they do to us. That's what they do, and I refuse to do it to them. But I will tell you right now, the radical left-wing portion of Democrats, yes, disparage them because they've earned it. These people on the far left portion of the party that are taking over the reasonable Democrats and pulling them and pulling them and pulling them to the left with their money and their influence really are not the people you're used to dealing with in the past. They're not the Bill Clinton Democrats. Some people shriek in horror when I say that. Folks, listen, I'm an ideas guy. I am. And I can tell you right now, the second term of Bill Clinton, you'll never see that again. Second term Bill Clinton, he was the guy who gave the speech. You remember? The era of big government's over. Can you imagine hearing that up in Capitol Hill now? It's over. Folks, on the ugly side, too, I promise I'll leave you with the good news. Don't worry. It's not going to be one of those Debbie Downer speeches, all right? This Spygate disaster is the worst scandal I've ever seen in my lifetime. I literally wrote a book on it. I have 2 co-authors. The book is footnoted to death. Folks, I have never seen something so disastrous in my lifetime. We spent probably a year of my life putting this book together. It wore me out. I was talking to some of you privately. We were taking photos back there. It probably dumped 7 years off my life putting this book together because it was such a chore and I had such a fear of putting it out there and these left-wing media loons attacking every sentence of it that we had to have it read and checked and triple-checked and quadruple-checked to make sure everything was footnoted ad nauseum. Folks, the book is a stunning indictment on the biggest political scandal in any of your lifetimes. This makes Watergate look like a day in the puppy park, folks. This is really, really bad what happened. They moved from plan A to plan B to a cover-up. Plan A in this thing, to take that, and make no mistake, this was an operation from day one to take down this entire campaign. Do you know what these people did? They engaged in historic numbers of unmasking attempts. You know what that is? Think about what I'm talking about here. Your private phone calls, something in the United States of America that without a warrant were deemed sacrosanct by everyone from the ACLU to Genghis Khan on the right. They unmasked, in other words, essentially wiretapped and listened to private phone calls, historic numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, this happened. I don't know all of your politics in the room. I can assume because it's the Liberty Forum, you're generally conservative or libertarian. I'll be honest with you, I don't care. I'd talk to a liberal group and give the exact same darn speech I'm giving you right now. That happened. The Obama administration listened in on private telephone conversations of people using it. And what did they say? Well, it was legal to do it. That's not the question. The question is, was it right to do it? There are a lot of things that are technically legal that aren't right. When the unmasking and the listening in on the Trump team to take them down, make no mistake, this was an effort to gather political intelligence on this Trump team. This Russian collusion story was BS from the start. They knew it. You know what? At some point, I'm going to look up this article. I'm going to show you something. It's going to really freak you out. When the unmaskings didn't work, and when I say didn't work, what do I mean? They couldn't find any evidence. There was no there to take the Trump team down. There's significant evidence now they moved into tapping into this NSA database, the metadata database, searching the database. You may say, wow, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Really? Because the FISA court themselves did an audit of that whole NSA database and said, we've had an unusual number of requests from, quote, private contractors into the NSA database. They've never told you who those private contractors are. All your emails, all your texts. Well, that plan didn't work either. Why didn't it work? Because Trump didn't collude with the Russians. This was nonsense. This whole thing is made up. Are you telling me after 3 years now of going through this, with the NSA database, the unmasking, the unprecedented power of the United States government brought down on the Trump team, that there's this clue, the Rosetta Stone to Trump-Russia collusion is out there and you just haven't seen it yet? We know what Trump, he watches Fox News in his pajamas. That was a story. Remember, that's not a joke. That was a real story. We know he likes Diet Coke. We know on Cinco de Mayo he eats taco bowls. He put it on Instagram. But you're telling me this big Rosetta Stone Russia collusion is out there and we all missed it? Folks, it's crap. This is a box of air popcorn. So plan A wasn't good enough. So they moved to plan B. Plan B was the FISA process. They said, well, and I write in the book, if you read the book, you'll see why the unmasking and the tapping into the database didn't work out. Mike Rogers, who was the head of the NSA at the time, is the quiet hero in all of this. He shuts his whole thing down. And you know what's convenient? Mike Rogers goes up 10 days after the election when Trump's the president-elect. And you know what he does? He meets in Trump Tower with Donald Trump. And what does Trump do the next day? He leaves Trump Tower. And he goes to Bedminster, never to return for those meetings again. Why do you think that happened? Oh, read the Washington Post articles from right around that time, too. Who calls for Mike Rogers to be fired after the meeting? Obama's team. Folks, this is the biggest scandal of your lifetime. It's sitting right in front of you like a ham sandwich. Just eat it. It's sitting there. So plan A is where they moved to plan B. Plan B is the FISA process. Now, what's the problem with the FISA process? It's a court. Who sits in a court? A judge. What do you have to give to a judge? Evidence. But what don't they have? Evidence. They've got Zippo. I can't make the okay sign. Supposedly it's a white power thing now. No, I was going to say zero. No, I'm not kidding. Like these kooks in the media said the okay sign is like a white power thing now. I'm like, it is? I thought it meant okay, but whatever. So I can't do that. Zero. I'll make it like this. Zero. They had zero evidence. They had nothing. Zippo. Nothing. So what do? They made it up. They go and hire this company at Fusion GPS, And folks, wait, hold on. I never do this in the middle, but there's an article. You guys got to read this sometime. You'll laugh. It's the greatest thing ever. There is an article. Here it is right here. I keep it up on my phone. You want to read the dossier? When was the dossier written? You have any idea? 2016, right around the end. There were 21 different memos. Conveniently, this article that sounds awfully like the dossier in the Wall Street Journal was written April 17th, 2007. Who's the author? Glenn R. Simpson and his wife of Fusion GPS. Write this down if you think I'm messing with you. Wall Street Journal, the title is How Lobbyists Help Ex-Soviets Woo Washington by Glenn Simpson. Read the piece. It is the dossier. It's the whole. He basically took a pre-packaged movie script he wrote in 2007, scratched out the names, put in Donald J. Trump, walked into the FBI and said, here you go. And these guys at the upper level, I love the Bureau working. They're great. But these goofballs at the top who had no idea what was going on, take this dossier, walk it right into a FISA court, and there you go. They've got an open path to spy on Donald Trump. What a skip. Read that piece. You will be like, oh my gosh. It's the dossier. The title? Yeah, this is you'll laugh. Read that. You're going to laugh your butt off when you read. I talk about it on my podcast all the time. It's called How Lobbyists Help Ex-Soviets Woo Washington. It's by Glenn Simpson. Google the piece and read it. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is the Donald Trump story without Donald Trump. They just put his name in there. This was a pre-packaged pile of garbage. It was entirely made up. Plan B fails too. Why? They still don't have evidence. They've got nothing. Now they've got a FISA warrant to listen to the whole Trump team. Now some of you out there may say, how are they listening to the whole Trump team? They only had a FISA warrant on Carter Page, right? That's not how this works. FISA's different. They have this little thing called the two-hop rule. You know what the two-hop rule is? If I get a FISA warrant on you, I get to hop to whoever you email and then whoever they email, which essentially meant the entire Trump team. They walked right in the back door. And they found nothing. Zero. Zilch. They found nothing still. Finally, Plan C comes in. What's Plan C? Mueller. You're darn right it's Mueller. Plan C is the cleanup man, the mop-up guy, the bag man. Why do they need a bag man? Why do they clean up aisle 4? Why do they need that? Because Trump won. Nobody thought he was going to win. Ladies and gentlemen, listen, I've been in this for I've run 3 times. I know the conservative space like few people around. I've seen it. I've commented on it. I've run in it. I'm still in it now. I'm an activist at heart. All that other stuff is great, but my heart bleeds in this movement. These ideas matter to me. You like me on Mark Levin? You like me on Mark Levin for that reason. This bleeds to me. This stuff is real. They needed a bag man at the end for this because nobody thought Donald Trump was going to win. Take that check to the bank, cash it, spend the money. Nobody thought he was going to win. There was no cleanup operation. There was no need for it. The cleanup operation was the election. Hillary came in, all these people sweeping the offices, all goes away. Don't even worry about it. Election night, everybody freaks out. When I was on the air with CRTV, and I just want to note, if I can be slightly pretentious for a moment, forgive me, Lord, in advance. I called this election. If you go back on SoundCloud and listen to my podcast the night before the election, I called every state, every one of them. You know why? I'd been out knocking on doors. I was running in that cycle for Congress. And this is actually, I'm not going to get to the whole good, bad, because I want to take your questions. I'm going to wrap this up at this, but this is a really cool story. I knew Trump was going to win because I'd be out there knocking on doors and I'd get any of you run for office, you get a walk list, right? And the walk list you get on doors to knock on in a Republican primary are Republican voters, but people who vote. You're not going to you can't knock on every door, so you only want to knock on doors of people who actually vote. So I said, give me the 4x4s. In other words, the Republicans who only voted in the last 4 primaries and the last 4 elections. Those are the diehards, right? Those are people who, like a nuclear war, couldn't keep them away from an election. I go, I want to talk. I want to knock on their doors, right? I'd walk down these streets in Cape Coral, Florida. And Cape Coral, if you've ever been down there, the way it's set up, you can't drive. You have to walk everywhere because of the canals. There's just no way to drive. You have to go in and out. It was just annoying. So you just walk. And I'd walk down these streets. They'd all have Donald Trump signs, and they were not on the list. And I called my campaign manager. I said, Maria, I'm wasting a lot of time. I'm just going to start knocking on these doors. I got to see what's up. Folks, I probably knocked on 2,000 doors. Probably 400 of them were people who had never voted in their lives, had Trump signs. And I said, you're not on my list. Do you vote? Never. Are you voting now? You're darn right. I'm voting for Donald J. Trump. I called that night. I said, folks, these polls are wrong. They are wrong. This guy's got people fired up like I've never seen. Listen to the show. I said he's going to win Wisconsin. He's going to win Michigan. This thing is over. And everybody at CRTV laughed at me. I got into a big fight with Dan Horowitz. He's like, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. He's going to get smoked. The conservative movement's over. I said, Dan, this guy's going to win. And when they called Pennsylvania at 2 o'clock in the morning, I called my beautiful bride, and I said, this is the greatest night of my life. We have finally owned the libs. This is the greatest thing ever. Was it not? Was it not the greatest thing ever? Right? Man alive. I walked out of that hotel in Washington, D.C. You should have seen these people, the looks on their faces. Listen, I'm a Christian. God, I love you. Jesus Christ, you have done more for me. But I forgive me. That is the one moment I was like, yeah, you guys deserve that. I'm sorry. They were so horrified. And here's the best part. We come back to we were in the Grand Hyatt right next to Capitol Hill, right? So it's packed with all Hillary supporters. I come back at 3 o'clock in the morning. When I left, they had this monster TV screen on in the lobby with CNN. I come back, Fox News, baby. I was like, yes. It was the greatest thing ever. People in the lobby were like throwing stuff at the screen. And it's funny. I read it to Pete Hegseth the next day, and he just gave me the look like, yeah, we did that, didn't we? I'm like, yes. So getting back to Mueller. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off track. I do this all the time. No two speeches are ever the same. That's why it's funny. My wife emails me. She goes, Joel needs a speech. I'm like, don't even bother. I'm like, just give him something because I'm never going to talk about what I say I'm going to talk about anyway. It always goes off track. But nobody thought Trump was going to win. They needed the bag man. They bring in the one guy knee deep in this whole thing who is so vested in it that they're sure he's going to make it all go away. Let me paint for you a little picture of Mueller. Because everybody's saying, oh, Mueller, listen, I deeply appreciate the man's service in the Marine Corps to the country. I mean that. But, folks, that does not give you a free pass for the rest of your life. I'm sorry. People make mistakes all the time who do really wonderful things beforehand. And in the United States, we have to hold you to account for that. Why is Bob Mueller the one guy who can make this whole thing go away? I'm going to paint for you a little picture right now, right? So the dossier we now know is fake. No serious person thinks this thing is real. It's a piece of crap. It's garbage. It's made up. It's a fairy tale. It's an Aesop's fable, right? This thing had to be vetted. There's a procedure in the FISA courts. It even has a name. It's called the Woods procedure. You can look it up yourself. The Woods procedure is very detailed. The FISA court, in order to prevent bad information like fairy tales getting into the FISA court, the Woods procedure forks. The information goes through the FBI and the DOJ, intersects, comes back, and it has to be vetted at multiple levels before it dares go in front of that judge. That's why almost 90+% of FISAs are approved, because by the time it makes it through the Woods procedure, it's almost guaranteed to be true. One of the last people in the Department of Justice who had to sign off on that information as being authentic is the head of the National Security Division at the DOJ. And who was that? No. It was a guy named John Carlin. And who was John Carlin? You're like, I never heard that name. Oh, you should. John Carlin was Bob Mueller's chief of staff. Now, it gets crazier. He was the person who had that job before John Carlin was a woman named Lisa Monaco. Any of you remember that name? Lisa Monaco, the counterterrorism advisor to Barack Obama in the White House, who was also a close confidant of Bob Mueller. Oh, it gets worse. One of the cooperators in the case, a guy who's been feeding the Bob Mueller team extensive amounts of information on some overseas meetings with Eric Prince. He's a cooperator. He's helping Bob Mueller out. He has a lawyer. You know who his lawyer is? Catherine Rumler. Who's Catherine Rumler? Catherine Rumler was Obama's White House counsel. Well, no, it gets better. Catherine Rumler was also an associate of Bob Mueller, working on the Enron task force with Lisa Monaco and Andrew Weissman, Bob Mueller's pit bull, on the Russia counsel investigation. Folks, these people all know each other. Obama's fixer, Google Obama's fixer, Catherine Rumler. Read all the things she did to sweep Obama's garbage under the table, is the lawyer for a cooperator helping Bob Mueller. She knows Mueller. They worked together on the Enron case with Andy Weissman when all those convictions got tossed out. Folks, these people all know each other. He was the perfect cleanup guy. Clean up aisle 4. He comes in with the mop. We got this. Don't you worry, folks. Sweep everything away. One more little interesting tidbit about Bobby M. So Bobby M runs a few awful, the anthrax prosecution, total disaster. Enron gets all thrown out of court. Bob Mueller's tenure at the FBI was a disaster. Bob Mueller had a couple other investigations that were disasters too. One of them you may have heard of. They investigated a company called 10X. 10X has a connection to a bigger company you may have heard of. Uranium One, you ever heard of that? You ever heard of that uranium where we sold that uranium to the, which we did, by the way. Don't listen to, they say, oh no, we never shipped it out of country. No, we did. They did it under third-party trucking companies, so you'd never know. No, we did sell our uranium to the Russians through Canada. Make no mistake, that happened, right? So we prosecute, an informant gives up a bunch of information on this company 10X that's doing their dealings with Uranium One and this whole syndicate of uranium people, finds rampant corruption, finds out that the Russians are helping the Iranians build nukes to basically attack us. This is all coming from the informant. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all out there. It's in the book if you want to read it. It's in the newspaper. If you don't want to read it, I don't care. I appreciate it, but we're a huge bestseller. I think we're out of books there, but buy it anyway. I promise I'm not here to sell you extra books. I would have brought them. But it's so important you understand the details of this case. I don't care where you get this. Bob Mueller was the FBI director on the 10X case when the informant said the Russians were taking uranium to build the Iranian nuclear program. Who was the prosecutor? The federal prosecutor working with Bob Mueller to prosecute the 10X case. I'll give you a guess. His initials are RR. Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein was the United States attorney who prosecuted that case. Folks, you can't make this up. This actually happened. They swept it under the rug. They took a Friday night plea deal on a Friday news dump, did a quickie press release, and said goodbye, see you later. Folks, it's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. I'm going to skip over the bad. I'm just going to leave you with some good news, and I'll take some questions, because, like I said, I can go on forever, and on East Coast time, it's like 4 in the morning right now or so. I used to travel around the world and forget what country I was in sometimes. I call my wife. I'm like, is this Indonesia? Or what are we doing right now? It messes with your head. Remember, I'd come home, work out at like 3 o'clock in the morning because I was still on Indonesia time. It's like, where's Dan? He's in the basement lifting. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon where I just came from, so I was fine. Poor wife, she had to deal with all this. She's such a saint. Isn't she? She's great. Look at her. She's the best. Here's the good part, ladies and gentlemen. We have a president in there who is absolutely committed to cleaning this disaster up. This guy is taking no prisoners anymore. And I had to tell you, I never fake it with anybody. I endorsed Cruz. I still love Cruz now. I was a late adopter. But you know, some of the most powerful conservatives I've ever met, I think of like David Horowitz, are former liberals who saw the light. I have to tell you, I always liked Trump, and I liked his style, and I liked his sharp knuckles because I'm a brawler too. But I never in my life thought we would get such an incredibly dedicated conservative. This guy's been amazing. I mean, the judges, 26 circuit court judges, recommended by Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society and others. And listen, they don't pick them. Trump does. But these people are on a list of high-quality, vetted conservative judges. Guys, ladies, listen, I work for President Bush. I love the man to death. But we did some stuff that was just crazy. I'm sorry. We don't have the money for Medicare Part D. We spent a ton of money. A lot of stuff happened that we as principled conservatives have to say, time out, stop, not now. Trump has been terrific. The budget part, we're still working on it. But the tax cuts, he pushed these tax cuts through. Finally, we get on the corporate side. And what I love about Trump is he never apologizes. I tell everyone all the time, new rules. We win, you lose. End of story. No more garbage. We win. And he wins. He wins. He's a winner. He gets it. We had these mealy-mouthed, wishy-washy Republicans years ago. Whenever corporate tax cuts came up, the Democrats would go, these are cuts for business. Because these idiots on the left don't understand how cash flow works. Businesses are tax collectors for the government. They take it from you. Businesses don't pay taxes. They take your money, and then they add a tax on and give it to the government. They're not you. An income tax is a tax on you. A corporate tax that applies nationwide is simply a tax collection device through the private sector. No conservative had the cojones to go up there and go, yeah, you know what? It's a business tax cut. You're darn right. We need our businesses to make money. I love rich people. They're great. People go, it's a tax cut for the rich. Trump would be like, all right, that's terrific. Rich people are good. Middle class folks, we want everybody to make money. Everybody would apologize in the past. I never got that. It's a tax cut for the rich. You're darn right it is. People look at the left and they're like, you're not supposed to say that. I just did. They're like, but they're going to get a bigger tax cut than you. Well, that kind of works that way. It's called math. Okay, if they pay 40% of $1 million and I pay 40% of 100,000, you don't have to be a trigonometry major to figure out that yes, they're going to get a bigger tax cut. Welcome to Math 101. Are you guys really not that smart? And we used to apologize for economic freedom, like we owe the government more money. It's like, yeah, we spend $20 trillion in debt. We spend $4 trillion a year, and we spent the entire Bush presidency apologizing for tax cuts. Are you kidding? Folks, it's your money. You work your butts off. I have 3 darn jobs. It's a lot. It really is. I'm serious. I'm like worn out. You see me on TV sometimes, people email me, you look tired. That's because I am tired. I'm up all day. It's hard. I dug graves. I was a grave digger in a cemetery. I used to flip bagels in a bagel store for hours on a Sunday morning in front of that 600-degree oven. You know, it stinks. I painted houses in College Point in the 90-degree heat in New York forever. I work hard. I don't owe you anymore. We've given you tons of our money, and you flushed it down the tidy bowl. I'm sorry. We're done giving you more money. It's over. And I'm not apologizing anymore. And you shouldn't either. I tweeted out tonight, pardon my language, taxes suck. Don't give the government any more money. They're going to screw you over. Thank you, that's all. That was my tweet, and I meant every word of it. We've given them their money. What have they done with it? They've wasted it. It's gone. Listen, folks, I see a lot of folks in here. I don't know your ages. You all look 40. But some of you... You do. You look great. I'm assuming some of you may be on your 20th anniversary of your 40th birthday or something like that. I'm on the 3rd anniversary of my 40th birthday. But you paid this Social Security. That was yours. That was your actual money. You gave that to the government. Folks, none of you are under the illusion that money's still there, right? That's gone. No, it's totally gone. I tell people this all the time. You want to argue economic reality or not? Now, me as a young conservative, I always think of it this way. You all had it a lot tougher than I did. I mean, you are the greatest generation. Even your wars were uglier. I mean, you didn't get to Skype home. My grandfather fought in the Battle of the Bulge. I lost my uncle in Vietnam. He got the Bronze Star with a V cluster. He was shot in the back, saving his friends. My wealth and prosperity was your gift. So I've argued to my young conservative friends that we owe 55 and older Americans. We owe them that. We owe them it. I don't care where it comes from, my tax money, I really don't. But we owe them that. Promises were made to you. But what I don't like is when people argue back that there's, oh, no, there's a trust fund. Folks, there's not. We're not liberals. We don't live in that Jerry Seinfeld episode where George Costanza does everything backwards and it works out. This is the real world. There is no money. They betrayed you. It's gone. It is all gone. It is a paper IOU. And when we get back to reality and we start to acknowledge that, we can finally start to solve some problems. And I think we've finally got the right guy in the House to do that. We can take our tax money, we can fund our military, thank God for them, and thank God for every person in this room that put on that uniform. You are the real American heroes. They deserve it. And I don't think a person in this room would object to paying taxes for our military, our court system, our FBI. That's fine. We get that. Pay off our seniors who put that money in, give them the Medicare they got. But after that, ladies and gentlemen, it's over. For people who are 55 and younger, I'm sorry, pretending that this can go on forever is economic stupidity of the highest order. There is no money. We owe every single dollar we're worth. Do you understand that? We owe $20 trillion. The entire value of everything the United States produces in a year is that amount. We owe everything. You're like, that was the good news. Sheesh. No, here's the good news. The good news is this. The economy is growing at such a clip right now under Trump that if we just put a lid on this disastrous spending, forget about cutting for a minute. I want to cut, don't get me wrong. But I'm telling you, if we just put a lid on it and we keep these growth rates up of 4%, in 20 years we cut the national debt in half by doing nothing. Nothing. Just by growing out of this. But we need someone with the guts in there to finally take a stand. I'll leave you with this thought and I'll take your questions. Folks, listen, politics is not a golf game. I love this analogy. You can't just, you know when you're playing golf, right? I'm not a golfer. I stink at it. I have the worst slice ever. But really, I can hit the ball like 90 degrees that way, and it's supposed to go that way, which is phenomenal. That's like a skill in and of itself. In a golf game, you walk off the golf course, nobody cares. The guy behind you plays through, the golf course gets its fees. You can quit. You can. Nobody cares. You're only hurting yourself. Politics is a boxing match, man. When you go, oh, I'm done, the other guy's still whooping your ass. He's still hitting you. You can't give up. There's no quit. There's no, well, we won the last election. Trump's the president. It doesn't matter. And I'll tell you what, you want to hear the good news and the bad news? When we win in the midterms, the next day you get up again and you start right again for the presidential election. There's no celebrating. There's no nothing. Go crack some champagne the night of it. Have fun. The next day, get busy. This is a fight, folks. Get in the fight. Stay in the fight. Don't let this up for a minute and make America great again, damn it. We deserve it. Thanks for your time. Thank you. Just remember this. You know, history's never clean. None of this stuff is nice and cute. Like I said, you know, Washington's soldiers had to eat their shoe leather in Valley Forge as they starved to death. You're not starving to death. We've had to deal with some real horrible people in office who did really nasty things. But in my humble opinion, my faith means a lot to me. I know I don't talk about it much because I'm not, you know, I'm not Tony Robbins. I'm not trying to give inspirational speeches. But my faith matters to me. And if you ever read the book The Natural by Bernard Malamud, there's a really great quote in there. I'm not a big quotes guy because I always think speakers are lazy when they quote because they couldn't think of an original thought themselves. But this one's worth your time. It's true. And so like, anytime someone says, let me quote Sun Tzu, just get up and leave. You're like, oh my God, I've heard this 1,000 times. But there's a quote in there, Bernard Malamud, in the book, where he's talking to, the girlfriend's talking to Roy Hobbs. You know, and she says, you know, we all live two lives, the one we learn from and the one we live after that. The real path to happiness is through suffering. Don't ever forget that. You know, happiness through narcotics and drugs and drinking is shallow. It's faint. Matter of fact, those people wind up becoming depressed. Some of them become suicidal. That's not real happiness. Real happiness is suffering. Taking on real suffering for the benefit of other people. It's the message of Jesus Christ. Matter of fact, it's the message of almost all the Abrahamic faiths. All of them. Their sacrifice is the way there. I say this in relation to the Hillary Clinton. Again, not to give motivational speeches. That's not what I'm here for. But Hillary Clinton never lived that second life. She never learned from the first. And the greatest curse Hillary Clinton's ever going to have is one day she's going to walk in front of the same creator you and I did. And they're going to say, did you ever get past that first life you learned from? And her answer is unquestionably going to have to be no. She has never suffered for any of this. She has never learned anything about it. She's never learned a lesson. And ladies and gentlemen, combine that with the fact that generations of people, when the true story are told, are going to know who the real Hillary Clinton was. She has an eternal curse, not only in the afterlife, but on this earth as well. That's the real punishment. You're on the right side of history. Be proud of that. Don't live your life worrying about what's going to happen to these other goofballs. We got enough to worry about on our side. You're doing the right thing. You're on the right path. You're suffering for the cause. So thanks for your time, folks. It's been great.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I really
Dan
appreciate
Bongino.
it. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Oh, thanks. Good question.